And I would take the paper and read it, and my hands would be shaking.
It is an honor for me to have you here,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Carol Swain. And first of all, we're going to get deep into this right away because I'm obsessed with this book. It is called, can I make it official? We'll get a shot later. The Gay Affair, Harvard, Plagiarism, and the Death of Academic Integrity. Goodness gracious. That's a lot in this book. When does it come out first?
January 2nd, but it's available for sale now.
Okay.
So you can
yes, ma'am.
Your copy now.
Well, this is mine, I'm sure.
Right. Well, I'm going to send you a personalized copy.
Okay, that's better. I'm kidding. Thank you. I have so much to talk to you about and so many questions to ask and learn about you because you are a trailblazer in so many ways and heroic to me in so many ways. Yes, because of your accomplishments, but more so because of how you have chosen to live despite so much adversity coming your way. And I just want my audience to know more about you. I think millions do, but we need to keep that going because it seems like what is it about wine? The old adage about wine. I mean, it just gets finer with age. I mean, have you looked in the mirror?
Well, I can tell you that my hair cut is no accident, and my decision not to color my hair and do these things, I made a decision because I think that when you are a gray-haired black woman, you can get away with a lot. And so it's easier for me, for people like, oh, that's some crazy old aunt, or, that's grandma. Forget grandma. Grandma can get away with speaking truth in a way that if I was packaged differently, it might not be received as well.
I need to hear this because I'd come to Nashville to get my hair colored and I was there yesterday.
Oh, no, but I mean, you're not at that stage yet, but I'm telling you that I'm 70 now.
Oh, you're stunning.
I don't know how it happened. All of a sudden, before I knew it, I was 70. And I feel so free.
Oh, I love that. This is what I have to look forward to.
I tell people that I'm trans young. I identify as a 35-year-old.
Okay, I love you. Interview over. I'm trans young, she just said. I love you. Thank you for that one. I'm going to steal. I'll credit you. I've been gray since I was in my 20s. I'm 100. My hair is the color of your shirt, your beautiful jacket.
Oh, I bet it would be so striking.
I think the problem is this stupid industry I'm in. And they hire, everybody is half my age, and so I have to fake it a little longer, Dr. Swain.
Well, there may be something to that because I noticed that once I started wearing my hair natural, and this was after I became a conservative, I think people didn't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
Because originally when black people wore afros, it was a sign of militancy. And so here I am, a black woman, female conservative, with a natural hairstyle. And it has caused some black people to attack me, like, how dare you wear a natural? The argument about black people who are conservative is they really don't want to be black. And so I'm a black woman packaged as a black woman, and I'm conservative.
You just went somewhere that I didn't know that we'd go, and I am so grateful. So we're going to go here for a minute because the fact that your hairstyle upsets other people in the black community is ridiculous. That's my nice word because I respect you and I don't want to say the real word I'm thinking. It's ridiculous. Unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me as a black female conservative. I always say the worst attacks, the worst racist comments I've gotten are from people who look like us. Why is that?
When I'm out in the community, in the black communities, I'm traveling, black people that black people that recognize me, they're very warm, they're very welcoming. And I think that the attacks come from the elites. It comes from people that have been indoctrinated at colleges and universities, or some politicians. They're the ones who see black conservatives as a threat. But ordinary black people, they tend to be more conservative themselves. I've not gotten a lot of grief from them. And I think that they want to dismiss conservative views, conservative people, as sellouts. You're not really black, And so when they confront a black woman like me that has a natural hairstyle, and I'm letting myself age naturally, they don't know what to do with that, and so they attack, and I smile.
Why are we a threat? Why are you a threat?
Because if I'm right, they're wrong, and it's very difficult at times for people to admit that they've been wrong about things or that they're being used. And you see, even with the black female prosecutors and judges that have sort of led the lawfare account, not just black, I mean Alan Bragg, various people, they have put black folks out front pushing things, pushing extreme views of the law because blacks are being used. And so I think that it would be difficult for them to admit that they are being used by white progressives to advance an agenda that white progressives would not get as far if they didn't put minorities out front. But I'm very encouraged because I run into young black males and females all across the country who recognize me. Some of them say that they're conservative because of me.
Wow.
And I believe there is a revolution that is taking place. And a lot of the people that are in it are young people.
That if you have hope, then I have hope.
I definitely have hope in the young people in America. They seem to be getting it. And many of them were raised in families, traditional families, and they want that for their own children.
Yes.
I believe that's part of it.
Well, that's the thing that I think some overlook and don't comprehend. For the most part, when you look at the values of conservatives, black people fall more in line, usually, especially with the faith aspect, with conservatives versus liberals. And that's been a very confusing thing for me. I'll say this, Barack Obama, towards the end of the election, when he went, was he in Ohio? When he went and scolded that group of black men, scolded them for not voting, not standing up more, I guess, for Kamala Harris. What do you think that did? What kind of effect do you think that had?
No effect, because people by 2024, I think many black people had seen through the Obama presidency.
Yes.
And I can tell you that I was never fooled by Barack Obama. And in 2007, I believe, I wrote an article for Ebony magazine. Al Sharpton and I were invited to write articles about, is America ready for a black president? And we both said yes. Al Sharpton described a civil rights character like himself as the kind of person America would elect first. I described, I used Barack Obama as an example, and I said that white America would support a black candidate who made America feel good about itself. And he had given the 2004 speech at the Democratic National Convention, and he said all the right things about bringing Americans together.
Yes.
And it was such a feel-good speech. I knew that was the kind of black person that could be elected president. And so I came down on the side of it would be someone like Barack Obama. And so what I found interesting was once he decided to run, I guess in maybe it was early 2008, I'm not sure exactly when he got into the race, but he said that he read an article on vacation, which made me wonder if I played a small role in him getting into the race.
Yeah.
But I quickly saw that he was not who we thought he was. And that's because as a black person who came to faith late in life, I had my conversion experience in my 40s, I've visited lots of churches. I belong to a predominantly white church now, but I know that there's a church for everyone. If you are in a black nationalist church, you have chosen to be in a black nationalist church. And so the fact that he was in Reverend Wright's church meant that he did not share that vision of everyone coming together.
Yes.
And early on, I went to his website before it got scrubbed during the presidential campaign. And so he was very open about his position on gay marriage and just various positions where later he portrayed himself as conservative. I saw the real deal, and I was one of the blacks that did not support him. I did not vote for him. And because of his presidency and what I saw with critical race theory being mainstream, pretty much seeping into the culture, I actually did something that I had not done before. I was never really interested in Marxism. I just taught my courses. At first, I was a congressional scholar. I taught, but I never studied Marxism. I started studying Marxism after President Obama was elected, because I saw, these things that had been seminars at the colleges and universities, all of a sudden, it was affecting our culture, that restorative justice, which meant that if there were unruly children in the classroom, I'm talking about violent kids, all of a sudden you had to rehabilitate them. You could not suspend them from school. They were terrorizing, injuring teachers, and also making the kids who wanted to learn stay home. And so in those places where you had restorative justice, you had high absenteeism.
Yes.
Because other kids were afraid of the bullies who were running the schools. And then the restorative justice meant, in the criminal justice field, if a young person, a kid starts off at 9 or 10, they're committing crimes, they kept sending them home. It was like a revolving door until that child murdered someone, or there was a violent robbery or something they did that the criminal justice system had to get involved. All that was restorative justice. And so this Marxist theory was affecting our lives. And that totally changed me. And as a professor, I had pretty much, you taught my subjects, and I've always tried to teach with balance. Even when I started teaching the impact of communism on American political thought, I presented their side, Michael Moore's side, as well as the opposing side. And it would be at the end of the semester, I would let the students read my work, but they could also Google me and figure out where I stood anytime. But I saw just these theories being taken as facts, and the critical race theory and it morphing into diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of that took place, and I saw it was to America's detriment.
Yes. I think I'm still kind of heartbroken over what Barack Obama turned out to be. I did not vote for him in 2008 or 2012. I did not, because I did enough homework to know that he didn't align with my values. That's it. But when he won, he's my president. That's how I was raised. I'm an Army brat. You respect the commander-in-chief always.
How'd you like it when he started purging the military of
That was an issue in our home.
Yeah.
That was an issue.
It was so clear what was happening.
It was.
He wanted people who would be loyal to him, not to the
Correct.
Constitution.
Yes, yes. And there was some of that under Bill Clinton as well. I mean, I like people say, well, that's why you're a conservative, because you're military. I'm like, absolutely not. And I told you this earlier. My parents never once shared who they voted for. I asked them. I remember in 1988, I asked them, I was in high school, and I said, just a conversation with my parents. I'd come out of my government class that day in high school, and they said, none of your business. And I thought, well, what do you mean? They said, none of your business.
Secret ballot.
We want you to go determine who you want to vote for based on your values. You figure that out. That is yours. And that taught me so much, which is why as a journalist for 100 years, most of the time until the end when the world kind of changed, I never, ever actually brought it onto the camera at ESPN, because that's not my job. It's to
Right.
talk about my personal political beliefs. And I'm talking about sports, allegedly.
But what
But I
happened?
I was just going to say, I loved my parents doing that in that moment to make me do my homework. And I was so disappointed in what Obama turned out to be, because I was excited. I wanted there to be a black president. I just thought he was the wrong one. That's
I agree.
all. That's
I agree.
all. But the reason I'm still sad is because he ended up taking the best possible opportunity to unify and divided us even more, to the point of what it feels like today, even though, okay, Trump won, I think we're going to hopefully begin to heal a little bit. But I'm blown away at how dark it has gotten. And it did begin, in my opinion, with Barack Obama.
Well, I can tell you in 2016, and I know you remember this, as soon as Trump was declared the victor, it was like all hell broke loose.
Yes.
And the talks of impeachment started before he even took office. I went to the inauguration, and my group didn't get any violence or beaten up, but there were people that went to the inauguration or went to parties, and on their way back to their hotels, they were attacked. And that he was never accepted. He never got the honeymoon
Never.
period that presidents normally get.
Yeah. I think I want to focus on this book for a minute because I think what you have chosen to do with this book is so important to have out there, to help educate people as to how deep this has gone, and the reason why so much negativity has happened is because of what happens in our colleges and universities and what's allowed. So again, the Gay affair, Harvard plagiarism, and the death of academic integrity. Sum it up for me.
December 10th, 2023. Sunday evening, I'd just gotten home from the Christmas program when I received a phone call from Dr. Art Laffer saying, have you heard the president of Harvard University plagiarized her dissertation? And he said, guess who she plagiarized? You. And so then he told me to go to Twitter. Chris Rufo had this article. Then the media started calling. So I was one of a number of people she plagiarized. But in the book, I talk about how central my first book, Black Faces, Black Interests, the representation of African Americans in Congress, was to her dissertation. And you know, the dissertation is what she had to complete before she became Dr. Claudine Gay. And what she did was use my book, Black Faces, Black Interests, pretty much use that to write her research question without citing the work in her literature review the way you normally do.
Yeah.
It's okay to build on other people's work, to criticize other people's work, to take down other scholars. And so there were about 5 places where she plagiarized verbatim. But the most serious thing is that she took the idea and she wrote a book. She used my book, Black Faces, Black Interests, to set up a straw man for her dissertation without giving me adequate credit. And then she wrote at least 3 articles that clearly drew from Black Faces, Black Interests. In some of those, she had me cited in the bibliography, but not where I should have been cited. She didn't say what she was doing. And the book talks about when I first became aware that it happened 25 years ago. I didn't know, because once I moved to Nashville, I took a job at Vanderbilt. I wasn't focused on congressional studies anymore. I was writing about other things, and I was not so interested in Claudine Gay. And I remember hearing about Claudine Gay when I was on the faculty at Princeton. And I heard about this brilliant black student named Claudine Gay. She was like the talk of the town because she was so brilliant. And so that's how I had heard of Claudine Gay years ago, but I never knew her personally. So I didn't know that she had grown so fond of my work that it became a central part of setting up her career. And my first reaction was sadness.
Yeah.
I felt sad for me because I felt like in academia, your statue depends a lot on citations. And so like when you draw on someone's work or you use someone's work, you cite them. And then other people that read your work, they see the citations of the people that you used. You're a journalist, you know how this citation thing works.
And it's crucial, and it's just ethical.
So I felt like I was cheated out
Yes.
of citations, but I was sad for her. And I was sad because we were black women. And I felt like, she had risen with 6 months. She had been president of Harvard University. She was under fire, not just because of plagiarism, but because of her testimony before Congress about the anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish students and faculty that she was not dealing with adequately as president of Harvard. So it was deep sadness that I felt. And when people, first asked me about it, I wanted to read the work. So I started reading her articles and I started reading her dissertation. But my sadness quickly became anger when Harvard said that they were going to stand behind her, and they decided to redefine plagiarism as duplicative language without attribution. And to me, this is not about me and Claudine Gay. This is about the whole academic enterprise. Because if you redefine plagiarism and you remove that standard that's always been in place, and if Harvard University does it, It affects every institution. Every college and university looks to Harvard and Princeton and the Yale, these Ivy League schools. So it will, bring down the other lower ranked institutions, but also K through 12. And that's one of the reasons why I felt like I just couldn't let it go.
No. Was there a part of you that was hesitating and you thought, I will let it go? Did you consider it? Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
I became angry, but it took a while because I'm just not normally a person that gets worked up. But when Harvard was defending her and people were defending her, I saw it was much bigger than me and Claudine Gay and how many times she didn't cite me, that it had implications for education, not just higher education, but K through 12. But that anger, it was getting close to Christmas. I was about ready to visit my relatives. I worked my way through the anger, and one of the ways I worked my way through it is I started posting scriptures, Bible verses on social media, and I started reading my Bible more because I had to deal with how I was feeling. I had to get away from the politics, get away from it, calm myself down, and I was doing really well in January. And over the Christmas holidays, well, January 2nd, she resigned from Harvard and blamed racism, among other things. And then I was livid again. I was livid. And then Harvard wrote this thing about how wonderful she was.
That made me vomit.
And said she was the great scholar. And so I was livid all over again. And at that point, a lawyer told me he would take the case pro bono. I called the lawyer and I said, let's move forward. And so he sent a letter to Harvard on January 3rd, and that letter is in the book. And January 17th, Harvard responded. They wanted me to upload my complaint to their internal system, and I knew that it would not go anywhere through the internal system.
Right.
And because my lawyer, the pro bono lawyer, was in Texas, I decided I would need a local counsel because I was going to sue Harvard. I was determined I was going to sue Harvard. And so my firm wrote a letter to Harvard. And then we got a response from Harvard's attorney as well as Claudine Gay's attorney, and she hired one of the best, if not the best, copyright infringement attorney in the country. And I have excerpts from their letters. And one of the things that this book does, it talks about copyright law and how it's not a good way to deal with cases like mine. It's not designed to deal with academia because ideas are not protected. Like the theft of ideas, it's not protected under copyright law. And in the past, universities and industries, they police that. But when you have an industry or a university that chooses to call it duplicative language without attribution, then there's not any accountability. But the lawyers came back, with their lawyer language.
Yes.
Some of the things that they said was that use of my work was de minimis, meaning it was minimal, that it was fair use, and that ideas are not protected. And if I persisted with a lawsuit, that it would be a frivolous lawsuit, and that I could be responsible for the fees. And so the letter that came back pretty much felt threatening to me.
Yes.
But I was not deterred. I was going to move ahead. And then the letter came from Harvard, and they said, well, we didn't really publish her dissertation. It was published through a third party, and it referred us to her lawyer's letter, and so they had clearly coordinated. And then it also ended with telling me there would be a frivolous lawsuit. And I have excerpts from their letters, but I didn't publish their full letters because I learned that letters are copyrighted, and the person who sends you the letter owns the copyright to the letter.
No.
And had I published it, they could sue me.
They would come right back at you.
And
no
so
way.
I've learned so much about copyright law.
No way.
And so
there's some irony in that.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I share in the book, I was going to move ahead because I thought I could lose if I lost. I'm thinking I could lose $50,000, I could lose $100,000.
Yeah.
I had lunch with a law professor at Vanderbilt who was a friend of mine, very eminent law professor, and he read all the documents and he told me that he had great concerns. He was concerned that if I lost the case, I would be responsible for Harvard's lawyers, and that he was sure they were making $1,000 an hour. And so then I had to think. I thought about my retirement. I thought about my children and my grandchildren. I thought about my Social Security, and I thought, do you really want to be paying for Harvard's lawyers if you lose? Because they had deep pockets. They could just drag it out forever.
Of course.
And I made a very difficult decision because my personality is I'll fight to the end.
Mm-hmm.
I contacted my attorneys and said, don't file the complaint. They had already drafted the complaint. We were ready to go. And they were saying, you have a great case, and we think we can use it will be a test case, and it'll change copyright law. And then I asked, are you willing to go pro bono going forward? Because these were lawyers I was paying. And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. And so that was a factor, too, in my decision to end the case. And the professor who advised me, his name is Jim Blumstein, he said, well, you're an academic. Why don't you do a conference, or why don't you write a book? He said, in fact, you could call it The Gay Affair.
No way. No way.
And so that's how the book got its title, The Gay Affair. And it's like, I wanted the documents, I wanted the case out in the public domain, but I did not want to end up paying Harvard's lawyers and telling my story, and also trying to educate people about the extent of plagiarism in higher education. The book, if you look at some of the chapters, it's not just about Claudine Gay and me, it's about academia in general. And it's a plague that has impacted academia. And I believe that if you care about academic integrity, you have to hold institutions accountable. And it really encourages people to stand up. My hope is that it will have a far-reaching impact and that Harvard will be held accountable.
Yeah, oh, I hope so. Yes, because of all the people there making decisions, but for other academic institutions to see it and to see that, hey, now that you have done this, there will be others who will have the courage to stand up as well and hold them accountable. And maybe if they just don't allow that to happen, people won't have to do it. That's the goal.
I know, but you know something too? Harvard holds students to a much higher standard than the faculty. If students are caught plagiarizing, they may be suspended.
Oh, wow.
There are all kinds of penalties, and so there are double standards. And, you know, that's not right either. They can destroy a student's life, but then they allow someone like Claudine Gay, the former president, she's still on the faculty. In fact, fall of 2024, she has been teaching a course on research and reading, and she's never apologized. And in fact, Black alumni gave her an award for being this great person. And I responded on X. There was a time when Black people celebrated excellence, and there was a time when we all tried to be excellent. And I think that the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the rise of that has been detrimental to racial and ethnic minorities. For a long time, I've talked about critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I call diversity, equity, and inclusion affirmative action on steroids. Mm-hmm. During the time I was at Princeton in the 1990s, affirmative action became such a big issue because of pending court cases. And Derek Bach, former president of Harvard, and William Bowen, former president of Princeton, wrote a book called The Shape of the River. And it was all about affirmative action, and they were saying that there'd be no Black leaders if you didn't have affirmative action, and you had to do all these aggressive things or Black America would not have leaders, even though most Black leaders, if they're educated, they came from historically Black colleges and universities, not the Ivy League. I believe that there was a massive lowering of standards for minority students that started in the 1990s, and that Claudine Gay was a beneficiary of that. Because I know that when I got my early tenure at Princeton, I had to meet the standards. You had to have a path-breaking book. And so my first book won 3 national prizes and was eventually cited by the Supreme Court. That was the standard. She, I believe, has 11 published articles, no book, no major book, and one person reported that 3/4 of her work was plagiarized. And this was the president of Harvard University. And when I think about myself, I get incensed because I've had to work hard for everything.
Everything.
Part of my background, high school dropout, 1 of 12, a first degree from a community college, and it's always been about work, but also with me trying to excel. I've always wanted to meet the standards and exceed the standards. But here comes this person who is the offspring of immigrants, Haitian, but she comes from Haitian aristocracy. She went to Phillips Exeter Academy, by some accounts the most elite boarding school, in America. Undergrad, Stanford and Princeton, PhD, Harvard, and she plagiarizes?
Yeah, it's shocking, it's sad,
it hurts all of us.
So many things, it absolutely does. I was thinking about the timing because October 7th,
yes,
what happened in Israel.
Right.
And then, of course, the protests and everything that was happening on a couple of those campuses, as Ivy League campuses in particular, how she handled that and the criticism she received for her handling of it or lack thereof. And then it was, but she was almost forgiven for that. And then this news broke a couple of months later. The plagiarism, right? Isn't that chronologically the correct time?
Not exactly, and the book talks about it because before she testified, there were journalists that had gotten tips from some of the Harvard faculty that she was a plagiarist.
But when the news broke, the timing of when
it
found out.
When it broke.
That's what, yes.
It broke
so
after
been
the
simmering,
testimony.
It sounds like, but then, so I feel like, this was my question for you, I feel like Hamas, the October 7th, that attack happens, and then you find out in December, right?
Yes,
2023.
right.
And so she was fine for what happened in Israel, and this let them do their thing, and then this came along. And I remember being grateful, having been a fan of yours, number one, grateful that the news was coming out, saddened for sure. But the whole situation has changed a lot. The fact that it's out in the open now, and that the story broke of plagiarism. And that is the reason why she's removed now, correct?
Well, I mean, her account of it is that it was racism.
Of course, that's what she's saying.
Yeah. So it was a combination of things that led to her downfall, but she should never have been president of Harvard University. Never. And people that have watched her performance as an administrator, they point out just how she targeted certain people, like the brilliant black economist Roland Fryer. And his background, underclass background, kid was in a lot of trouble, and I think he attended a seminar given by an economist, and he became fascinated by economics, and so he got early tenure there, and I think he won the Genius Award, and his work was not coming to the right conclusions. Like, he was doing work on issues that related to race, but he wasn't getting the right answers. And she targeted him, and he ended up being stripped of his lab. And apparently, any work he publishes now has to be approved by people that are on the other side when it comes to ideas. But she brought him low. And so I think she was a problem. But they used her. She was used.
How did she get the job then? If she had all of this, the history of plagiarism that people knew about.
Aristocracy. She got the job, I think, because of diversity, equity, and inclusion that Harvard wanted to show. They had come so far. She was the first black president, and it didn't hurt that she was a woman. She was not the first woman president of Harvard, but she was the first black president of Harvard. So there were other black scholars that could have been chosen, Harvard graduates. There were other people on the faculty who were more distinguished, but she was the right one. Somehow she fit into that culture, but I believe a lot of the fitting in had to do with her pedigree.
Have you spoken with her ever?
You know something? I may have met her while she was a student, so I can't say that I've never met her. I certainly heard of her, and I have a sense of humor, and so my sense of humor is throughout the book. one of the things I say that when your first name becomes brilliant, maybe people don't check your work so closely because there was so much talk about this brilliant black woman. And obviously her dissertation committee did not serve her well. The plagiarism pattern could have started at Phillips Exeter, but she won a prize for her senior thesis at Stanford. And no one's been able to get their hands on a copy of it to run it through the plagiarism software.
Interesting.
And her dissertation, like, obviously she's been doing it for a while, but she got away with it. And I believe that if people think that you're brilliant or whatever they label you, she fit what progressive whites needed. And I'm bringing race into it because I believe that the progressive agenda, this Marxist agenda, they choose certain racial and ethnic minorities that share their views and values. And so that's why you see so many black, trans people or black people that are getting lots of attention because they identify as LGBTQ or something like that. Progressives seek out racial and ethnic minorities who fit their profile, and those are the ones they advance.
If you saw Claudine Gay today, if she was sitting right here, what would you say?
Well, if Claudine Gay, I believe at any point, had picked up the phone and called me and told me that she was sorry, I would have accepted her apology and you would not have that book in your hands. But she never did. And there was nothing in those letters. I mean, it's almost like Harvard was defiant. She's very defiant. And as far as my ending my lawsuit, one of the persons that helped me some financially, I contacted him and told him that I was not going forward with the lawsuit. And this is a man who said the only reason to sue someone is to make them uncomfortable, make them stay up late at night so they can't sleep. And he said, I can guarantee you that Claudine Gay will not lose any sleep over your lawsuit.
Interesting.
And Harvard, no one at Harvard is going to lose sleep. You're the only one that's likely to suffer. And so he said he thought it was a good idea for me to follow a different strategy.
I am grateful, and I think there's many others, and so many people in academia who've worked so hard to get there, and to witness someone benefiting from someone else's work and being rewarded for it by universities and elsewhere.
But here's the racism part. As conservatives, we don't like to talk about racism, but racism is real. Mm-hmm. The racism part of it is with critical race theory, part of it argues that minorities are victims, that we are all victims, and standards have to be lowered. And if you don't lower the standards, you're not going to have any black people. And they discount all the black people throughout history who have been successful, even before affirmative action. It's like these people didn't exist.
Yes.
And so you find Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. Some accounts say that it's a work of fiction.
It runs so deep. And I think people say, eradicate racism. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Sounds great. And guess what? As long as there are human beings on this earth, there are going to be prejudices of some sort, right? So it doesn't mean we don't keep trying. But I think it's tough to witness from within the black community, a community that, many people scream racism from it.
Well, there's a double standard.
That's my point. And so it's if a white person says it or does it, die, lose your job, all the things. But what you can say to another black person if they don't fit in your box, that's racist too.
I mean, there's a lot of racism that's black on black racism. And the Congressional Black Caucus, I mean, why do we need a Congressional Black Caucus? I've been saying that for years. But what I have seen and witnessed, through my 28 years in academia, and now I'm 70 years old, so I have a long period of time I've looked at history, is that the racism has always struck me as coming from the progressives. And during the time that I was in colleges and universities, the professors who pushed me and challenged me the most were the ones that were conservative. One of them, I would later learn, was a Republican. But they were the ones that really was more the cheerleader, you can do it. And I wanted to meet high standards, but they were the ones that didn't say that, but you poor black thing, the standards have to be lowered. And I had to work very hard because I didn't go to high school, and so I took remedial math in a community college. Never thought I'd become a university professor. I had people pushing me, saying, you know, I needed to go forward. And when I started graduate school, which led to the PhD and me becoming a professor, it was because I had applied for jobs. It was the 80s, it was a recession. I couldn't find the job I wanted, and so I applied to graduate school. I never had this plan of becoming who I later became, but I've always wanted to excel, and I've always just wanted to compete with the best, and it's been hard work. I've always struggled with math, and to get my PhD, I had to pass statistics courses, and I made a C in a math class, and maybe more than one math class, and I was happy to get it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, I'm done, check the box, don't show me that again.
And so it has been a battle, but when I see people that come from elite backgrounds and everything's handed to them, and it's because they fit in better. And I think people from me, like I come from the underclass. I'm first generation college student. Other 12, I was the only one that reached college. We don't fit in very well. And I think about my personality, like I've always been an outsider. Most of the time I've been the person that had their nose against the glass looking through. And those types of personalities are not rewarded, but that's fine because I feel like I'm uniquely wired. I am the person of all the people that Claudine Gay plagiarized, and there were many. The wrong one was me because I'm just the person that just couldn't walk away from it because I'm not wired to walk away from it. And so if those lawyers celebrated we got rid of that woman, it's over. I want to send them copies of my book.
I hope you do. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when they receive it and read it. You've mentioned a couple of times not being a high school graduate, and I want to remind people that this woman in front of me who ended up getting her GED and working at McDonald's while you're doing that, is that correct?
Well, some journalists put down McDonald's, and I have decided that it was a Burger King, and I worked half a day.
Okay, I love you.
I was not very good at it. In fact, I was so shy. I was painfully shy most of my life, and I did not get over my shyness until I was in my 40s. I had a Christian conversion experience, and it was like God took away my shyness. He impressed on my mind he'd given me a message bigger than me and that I should focus on the message. And so I started doing media interviews in the early 2000s.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and before that I had an opportunity to be on Good Morning America with my first book, and I didn't do it because I was afraid. It was always fear, and God took away my fear.
Well, I want to back up a little bit because, again, the full context, you have 5, is that right, 5 different degrees, a PhD.
I do.
That's why, to me, your background is so incredible. So the shyness, as a former and sometimes current shy person, believe it or not, I know how to flip the switch. I know how to work around it. I was so shy to the point that my parents' friends were doctors and said, you should take her to get checked out.
My mother said I used to hide behind furniture and peep out at people. And I can remember as a child needing something, wanting water, wanting something to eat. And it was like the cat had my tongue. I was just petrified. And when I got to college, and I graduated magna cum laude with my bachelor's degree at Roanoke College, Salem, Virginia, working 40 hours a week at the community college library, nights and weekends. But class participation, 10% of the course, I would write out a question or a comment, and I would take the paper and read it, and my hands would be shaking and my voice would be quivering, and I got the 10%, which made the difference between an A and a B. That's how I did it. And then I become a professor, and I was trying to write out everything I was going to say. If I had to introduce someone, I would have to write it out and read it, and I would be clutching the electrum, fear. And as soon as I had my Christian conversion experience, it was like God took it away just like that. And he impressed on my mind that he'd given me a message bigger than me, and I should focus on the message. And I realized that I was shy because I thought people would laugh at me because of my funny Southern accent or grammatical mistakes. When you come from the underclass, there's some things we say and when you're Southern, a lot of things you say doesn't sound right. The word just doesn't sound right. But I was so afraid people would laugh at me. But when I realized I only had to please God, I didn't care anymore.
Beautiful.
And that's how I became Carol Swain, who says whatever she wants to say or believes she needs to say. And I just don't live my life in fear. And I know it's a dangerous world.
It is.
And I make people upset at times. I don't go out of my way trying to make them upset or trying to be controversial. But I realized that we had this one life to live. And, you know, like when I'm on my deathbed or whatever happens to me, I don't want to have regrets that I held back.
I can't imagine now that you would, and you are so vocal and so confident with the way you do it. And to me, I'm even more in awe because of how you were raised. One of 12 kids, and
no indoor plumbing.
Nothing.
Had my first child when I married at 16, had my first child at 17, and went through depression in bad marriages. One I didn't think I'd get out alive. During the time I was at Princeton, I was always a spiritual person. I always knew that there was something bigger than me God in my life, and I knew that my life was not like anyone else of my siblings. And I had several experiences as a young adult where strangers came up to me and said, you know you're going to be famous someday? You're going to be famous. It didn't make any sense.
Of course.
In my early 20s, late teens, I would do suicide gestures. I'd take bottles of pills and I'd call someone. And it's like God had such a plan for my life.
Why were you contemplating suicide?
I was just so depressed. I was always so sad. And I didn't know I would go to college. I started at the community college, and then I did well, and then I just wanted a better job. I wanted to support myself without a man's income because I'd been in bad marriages, and I just wanted to make enough that I could live off my own income. I don't remember praying that, but I do remember the moment when it struck me that I had accomplished that, and I believe like God knew me before I knew Him. He knew that's what I was trying to accomplish, and He made it possible. And even though, you know, I come from poverty and I had my 2 sons, I never lived with a man that I was not married to. And I was married to their father. There was a second marriage that failed, but I did not, you know, raise my children in a situation where they saw me, you know, bringing in different men. Like everyone around me, I was always different.
When I think back on just getting to know you a little bit today, certainly, but just what I've read, to think about being one of 12 kids in poverty, and I didn't know, no running water. Your parents dropped out of school in the 3rd grade and the 5th grade. You witnessed abuse in your home.
Lots of abuse.
Growing up, yes. Get married at 16, a baby at 17, working through shyness, working through so many. And now you're a great-grandmother, right?
I am.
Can you reflect back on your accomplishments? Is there one thing or a couple of things?
What God impressed on my mind, I think, when I had my conversion experience is I don't feel that my story is about me, and I don't see it as a black story. I think it's an American story.
It is.
But it's bigger than me. And it's like God gave me that gift. But I can say that I have suffered a lot, and it's like I thought I would retire from teaching, you know, at a lot older. Like I took early retirement. I made a decision that I could not be my best self in an environment I thought it was hostile. And so I took early retirement. Now I see that that was the right thing to do because I'm reaching the world.
The freedom you have now that you did not have then, you're everywhere. You're everywhere. Most importantly, you're everywhere that you want to be. Is that fair?
And the PragerU videos I've done, like I've done 6, and I'm planning with them to do a 7th one. Altogether, they've reached over 100 million people. And then I have been in 11 documentary films. Probably the biggest one was Dinesh D'Souza's Hillary's America. That's where a lot of people came to know me. And there's something else I think is important to share. I've always hated my voice. And I looked forward to the day that I could go to a speech therapist and get help with my voice. And it was just something that I hated to listen to myself. Well, then I was in Hillary's America in 2016. All of a sudden, strangers started coming up to me and they said, I was watching that film and I was so depressed, and then I heard your voice. And it was so soothing, they said.
Wow.
It was so soothing. And so I heard that a few times, and then people would say, I can be anywhere in the house. I can be outside in the garden, and you come on, and I say, that's Carol.
They knew that voice that you didn't like.
Yeah, that voice that I didn't
Wow.
like. And all of a sudden, I realized that that wouldn't be a good use of my money.
No, I hope that, and I know you're a woman of God and so humble but proud. I think we're told, don't make it about us. But I also think it is important to share not necessarily the accomplishment itself, but how we got there, so then others have hope. So is there one thing that you can share that you're most proud of because of the adversity that it took to get there? I look at all your degrees, I look at all you've accomplished in your books, and your voice today. What are you most proud of?
I'm proud of the fact that today I have strangers come up to me. They're young people, a lot of them young, old, but different races. They come up to me and they will say, I know you from usually PragerU videos, and I'm a conservative because of you.
Oh.
And people have come to faith, and God has given, He's trusted me with the influence. And that's something that I don't know if that's a point of pride, because I know that when you have the ability to influence people, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. You can harm people. And I fear God. I don't want to misuse the platform that He's given me, but He's given me a platform, and He's given me financial security. He's given me far more than I ever imagined, and I realized that leaving academia was the right thing, and I would never have left unless the heat hadn't been turned up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so that was a way of repositioning me. And I think it's important for people to know that sometimes when you think, and for 2 years I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that I was too young to not work. Yeah. I had to reinvent myself, but it was the right thing.
One thing I did want to make sure I touched on is your, with faith and politically, from Democrat to Republican, and now being able to communicate with President Trump and seeing the evolution of this country over the last 4 years, sadly.
Right.
Before that, the first 4, and really, like we were saying, since Barack Obama. I think there were a lot of scared people with this election who finally did something they thought they'd never do. Obviously, when you look at the map, all red.
My Christian conversion was like a journey. I had a very dramatic experience in 1997, and by 2000, I knew what it meant to follow Christ. As I became more conservative, I became more uncomfortable with the Democratic Party. But I became an independent first. And it was 2009 that I became a Republican. And that was when Michael Steele became the first black head of the RNC. Mm. I don't believe in coincidences, I happened to be in D.C. at the hotel where the meeting was taking place. And I have the gift of being able to get into a room without credentials. And somehow I got into the room, and I told him I would be his first black Republican convert. And and so that's when I became a Republican, 2009. Mm-hmm. But for a while I was an independent. And President Bush appointed me to the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Tennessee Advisory Committee to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission as an independent. And Barack Obama renewed the Tennessee advisory position. And so I have had political appointments from Bush, Obama, and Trump. Trump appointed me vice chair of the 1776 Commission. And so I've had a great life.
You have.
And I would like to write my memoir, and I came from nothing. And and it's not, I didn't raise up myself, I take no credit. And people talk about affirmative action, and I have a book, The Adversity of Diversity. I tell you that the Civil Rights movement, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which focused on non-discrimination, outreach, and equal opportunity, I benefited from that because there was a search for talented minorities. There was a time when the focus was on talented minorities.
Yes.
Those were the ones who got rewarded. But somehow in the 1990s it changed, and it went back to there are no talented minorities, that we're all victims, and they started reaching down, I would say, to the bottom of the barrel and elevating people because of their ideological views and not because of their qualifications. And I believe with the Trump presidency, eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion is the right thing to do, and that we got it right in the 1960s. When we passed the Civil Rights Act, we got it right. I think if we go back to non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and outreach, our race problems will take care of themselves.
How tough will it be to do that?
I don't think it will be tough. I think that it's easy to do in the federal government, but I believe that America has nothing to fear. And if we go back to the original intention of the Civil Rights Act, which complied with the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, if you go back and if you want to help people with disadvantage, do it on a non-racial basis.
Yes.
And that just makes sense.
Otherwise, it's actually racist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not rocket science to me.
And one of the reasons that I really love J.D. Vance, I think he was the right person for the vice presidency. Some of it is identified with him. Like he understands the kind of poverty that people like me came from. And in my story, again, it's not a race story, it's an American story.
American story.
I grew up believing and being taught that if you worked hard and got an education, you could make something of yourself. And it was about you making something of yourself. It's not someone else making something of you. And so when you apply those principles, it doesn't matter where you come from. I believe the American dream is attainable, and that most Americans want to see people succeed. They don't care whether your race. They just want to see you succeed. And I benefited from, people that met me. Some of them liked me, and people either like me or they hate me. There's no middle ground.
I'm familiar with that. You've just done it over more important things. I'm going to end on this because I'm so grateful for your time. I think you'll appreciate this based on your life. I talked about my dad and being raised by two incredible parents who've been married for 53 years.
Praise
and
God.
Interracial marriage. My black dad, my white mother, they've been through it. They've got a story. And along with our room inspections that I was telling you about earlier, my dad had us memorize part of the cadet prayer from West Point. That he had to recite 100,000 times when he was a cadet there.
Give me a couple of lines.
This is the part. Yeah, I don't know all of it. This is the part that we had to memorize that has changed my life, and this is what you have done with yours, I believe. Help me to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half truth when the whole can be one.
Oh my, I like
I have
that.
to send that to you because it actually makes every decision in life so much easier. Because we all know the right thing. We just don't want to usually do it because it's difficult.
Is it okay if I pay my great-grandson to memorize it?
Yes, yes. I'm stealing a couple of your lines. What was your trans young thing from earlier?
That I identify, I'm 70, but I identify, I'm trans young, I identify as a 35-year-old.
That I am too. So I'm stealing that so you can steal the cadet prayer because that's not even mine. But think about that, the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And you, by writing this book and many other things, you weren't content with a half truth. Everybody needs to know the whole truth. So that's the cadet prayer. That's what I have lived by, even when it's been so scary and so uncomfortable and so expensive and so embarrassing and all of the things. It actually makes it easier when you know it's the right thing deep down.
But principles, I mean, if we could
Principles,
go
God
back
forbid.
to a principled way of living.
Yes.
Like with many of our politicians, the reason they have a problem is they have no core, they have no principles. Because if you have a principle, you apply the principle, the decision is easy.
It is. They also live in fear, which I understand, especially these days, whether it's for cancellation, which is legitimate, financial reasons. For me, that my faith is the only reason I'm sitting here with you today.
Amen.
Because I've been so scared for years to disappoint, to upset anybody, to not do exactly what I'm told.
Right.
And to be different and to think the way my heart wants me to think, not based on my skin color or my gender. And I think your faith has been quite inspiring as well. So thank you for sharing it. And thank you for sharing your story. It is one that needs to be, your grandbabies, and great, are lucky. They're blessed to have you.
But there's one thing I want to say.
Yes, ma'am.
There were many times that I didn't want to stay in school because I'd already gotten, I had gotten degrees, and I knew that I could stop and be successful. I was not someone that wanted to necessarily be a university professor, but what kept me going was there were so many people who said, "You're going to do great things. I'm expecting you to do such and such." And for a while, I had anger because I felt like I was doing it for them instead of me.
Yeah.
But their words and belief in me kept me in the game.
Okay. So we take that, and now afterwards you realize, I needed to do that for me.
Uh-huh.
And look, now you have strange young men and women coming up to you on the street thanking you.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Isn't God good?
So good.
Right.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you in person. By the way, we are right here in John Rich's house.
Isn't
This
that
is kinda
something?
cool,
John's my
right?
buddy.
I know. You two are like this. Thank you.
Thank you.